Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with a little bit of a video talking about the cool little tools we get out of Eldritch Moon for Soul Sisters. I've had a lot of emails and comments on my top 10 video about what cards I could put into Soul Sisters. As many of you may know, Soul Sisters is kind of my pet deck. It's my go-to deck in Modern when it is viable, when the meta is perfectly ripe for like a life gain type deck. I think I'm pretty split on Soul Sisters at the moment. It does very well against the hyper-aggressive decks like Zoo, and is decent against Jund. The way that Jund is built right now with very, very heavy control, it's not as good as it used to be when they used to pack it full of more creatures and just a lot more of the early disruption. But I still think it's a fine choice, and it still does okay versus Nahiri Jeskai. What it doesn't do good against is the combo decks. It's terrible versus Tron. It's terrible, both versions, blue and red-green. It's terrible versus Ad Nauseam. It's terrible versus Lantern Control. It's terrible versus Storm, even. And really horrid against scapeshift. So anyway, so when those type of decks, which I think that Modern is full of plenty of those right now, I don't really like to play Soul Sisters. But I do like to test it every time there is a new set that brings as many cards to the table, and Eldritch Moon actually brings a ton of cards, and we'll talk about those in a second. And I'm actually going to talk about a specific card too that people have suggested and why I think it's a horrid card in Modern especially. I don't like it in Standard, and I absolutely hate it in Modern. So anywho, let's get down to the nitty-gritty here with Soul Sisters. So this is my current build. I have been using Thalia's Lieutenant in the build. I'm not quite sure that it is really merits over Squadron Hawk. Squadron Hawk is a card that is really, really powerful against decks like Jund and the white control decks, or the blue-white control decks especially, because it fills back up your hand. And with cards like Honor of the Pure, it gives you a 2/2 threat, which in Modern is really all you need. Modern is a very one-for-one format, and if you can stay above card advantage of your opponent, a lot of times you can grind them down. This version, I'm running a ton of Soul Sisters. I'm running a whole package of them because they do work very well with the Thalia's Lieutenant. And the Thalia's Lieutenant will give them a +1/+1 counter. Like, you can go turn 1 Soul Warden and then turn 2 Thalia's Lieutenant. And that's not bad. You got a 2/2 on the board and then a Thalia's Lieutenant that can get bigger. You slap down like an Honor Pure late game, and even your Soul Sisters are up to 3/3s. What I really like about Thalia's Lieutenant is it does get your Soul Sisters above Golgari Charm especially, or Knight of the Soul's Betrayal, which is actually quite relevant versus the Jund matchup. And you never know. Sometimes you get above like Electrolyze, so they have to just Electrolyze one of them. And it's just, I really like the Thalia's Lieutenant in this deck, especially with Serra Ascendant. So first turn Serra Ascendant, second turn Thalia's Lieutenant, swinging for 2. It just gives the deck, I think, a lot more power, as almost everything in the deck is humans. The only thing that is not humans is the Johnny's Pridemate and the Spectral Processions, which I do think are very key pieces to Soul Sisters, but we're going to see if we can actually theorycraft here at least, and see if we can brew a deck that's more human-based, and I think that we do get some really good cards out of the Eldritch Moon. Martyr of the Sands is also human, and it also turns on Serra Ascendant, so you can actually go this more Martyr build. Again, Johnny's Prime is just so powerful in this deck. I don't think you can take it out. We'll have to see. We'll mess around with it. I did mess around with like a humans build with the Champion of the Parish, which I absolutely do think can go in this deck. Also, Kytheon is not a bad card to put in this deck because you do swing in with 3 creatures quite often. And then flipping Kytheon is actually huge in Modern, as Kytheon can start to be a beater himself, or can start giving your cards indestructible, which is very, very relevant in this format. So the mana base is still 21 lands with the 4 flagstones and 3 ghost quarters. Why you run this package is it makes it so your ghost quarters aren't dead cards, versus the decks where ghost quarters does not kill anything. Ghost quarters is super good versus Inkmoth Nexus, so both Affinity and Infect. Like Affinity, the only card that's really going to get you is possibly Etched Champion, which is still damage based, so you can actually gain a ton of life. And then Inkmoth Nexus sometimes is very, very hard because you don't have the Squadron Hawks anymore to chump block. So the only thing that can chump block is the Spectral Processions. So Ghost Quarters is very key versus Inkmoth Nexus in both Infect and in Affinity. It is also okay versus Celestial Colonnade and Raging Ravine. It's also good versus the Urza's lands, and so that's why we're really keeping the Ghost Quarters in here. And then against decks that you don't have any use for it, you just Ghost Quarter Flagstones and get 2 planes. Helps thin out your deck. I like the card a lot. Still running 4 Windburst Heights, might go down to a 2 of because without the Squadron Hawks again, and if we do end up cutting the Spectral Procession, Windburst Heights is going to be extremely hard to actually attack in with 3 different creatures and get the value out of it. And if we do cut out Spectral Processions especially, Windburst Heights, Spectral Procession is one of the best cards underneath Windburst Heights. So for right now, it's still in the deck, and I think that it still has merit to be put in the deck. So my sideboard, so let's just go. So we have 4 Honor the Pures, 4 Thalia's Lieutenant. These are kind of our pump spells. I'm running 4 Arch Champions main board right now because red is still huge. And this is kind of the trump card versus red. And then Ranger Vios is just extremely good in this in Soul Sisters. It goes and gets you a Sarah's Ascendant. Late game, it's double Sarah's Ascendant. It's just value, value, value. So I do like the Ranger of Vios. Spectral Procession, 3 for 1 with Honor the Pure. Such a boss of a card. Only 2 Path to Exile's main board because a lot of the decks that I've been playing against, I don't even care about pathing anything. It's okay versus like Wormcoil Engine, but you're probably dead against Tron anyway. And it's decent versus Jund if they have a Kalatas, but I don't like to path anything but really Kalatas and Tasigur in those type of builds. Like if I'm going against Grixis Delver or even Jund, I don't think that Tarmogoyf or Delver or Young Pyromancer are worth pathing. I think that just clogging up the board is much better, so I don't like them main board at the moment. Same thing with Zoo. There's really nothing in Zoo I want to path. Infect I do, but Bogles I miss everything with Path to Exile. It's kind of just an awkward card right now in the main board with Soul Sisters. I've been having a 1 of Pay No Heed as an answer versus Infect and Bogles, and it's decent versus scapeshift because you can half their damage, but it's definitely not... It's definitely not a card that I'm too super excited to actually have to have in my sideboard. Hallowed Moonlight was in here for Nahiri Jeskai, Living End, and it's good against Dredge, it's good against Living End, it's good against Nahiri Jeskai, it's good against Breach Shift, or Titan Shift, whatever they want to call it, and it's good against Goryo's Vengeance. So Hallowed Moonlight has been in the sideboard for that reason. We have Mark of Asylum. This card is insanely good versus Jund and any sort of red base like Electrolytes based decks, Lightning Bolts based decks. It prevents all non-combat damage that would be dealt to creatures you control. Huge, huge, huge versus Pyroclasm, Anger of Gods, whatnot. But this card is one of the cards that could come out due to a new card that we have access to. I do like Mark of Asylum because you get to put it out and then you forget about it after that. You don't have to keep it in your hand like the Pay No Heed type card. Rest in Peace is good versus Jund and good versus a lot of the Delve and Living End and those type of decks. Stony Silence is good versus Affinity and good versus Tron, but as of now, Lantern Control too. I don't know if we need Stony Silence in the sideboard. There's not a lot of artifact-based decks that I'm too worried about in the metagame. I've had up to 4 Stony Silences before in the sideboard. Celestial Flare is my go-to card versus Infect, and it's also decent versus Affinity. When a lot of times Affinity tries to go wide though, but a lot of times it's your answer to their Etched Champions. Archangel of Thune helps you kind of beat the mirror and beat like Merfolk. It lets you go over the top. Again, I'm not quite sure Archangel of Thune is a deck that I care about in the sideboard at this moment. I might just want a Wrath of God. And Return the Ranks is a good card to just get back a lot of cards that are in your graveyard. You return X target creature cards with confirmed back cost 2 or less. Everything is basically 2 or less. Late game, you have like Thalia's Lieutenants and a bunch of sisters in the bin. You can like cast the Spectral Processions and the next turn have at least even 6 or 7 mana, and that's going to get you 5 cards back and get you back in versus a board wipe. And then Sundered Growth is just a flex spot. It's just better than Disenchant because if you happen to have a Spectral Processions, you can actually populate. But anyway, that's kind of what I've been running at the moment. You can run, I've had so many different cards in the sideboard. You can go back to previous videos to see what those cards are. But that's kind of the gist of the metagame at the moment and my best tools for that. Now we're going to talk about cards out of Eldritch Moon that I think will actually benefit this deck. At least the sideboard, or at least is worthy to test them out. So the first card I want to talk about is a card we are not going to put in the deck. I think it's terrible. I think there's better 4-drop slots. If we want like a 4-drop, Hero Bladehold is an insanely powerful 4-drop. We already have Ranger. We can throw in another Archangel Thune that kind of the 4/5 drop slot. I've had even Brimaz, I think, would be better than this particular card. I've had so many different cards that I've tested out in the 3, 4, 5 drop, and I haven't really liked any of them. But this one specifically is Gisela the Broken Blade. Absolutely, absolutely do not like Gisela. I think Gisela is just such a trap card. I think that the 4 mana for a 4/3 first strike, flying first strike lifelink, it gets outclassed by a lot of things and dies to Lightning Bolt. That's the huge thing. Anger and Lightning Bolt kill the card. Every deck is running Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix as well, and I just do not think that this card has any merit whatsoever in the deck. It's just a trap card to try to be including in the deck. Again, I don't think you bring it in versus it gets bounced by Merfolk. Yeah, I don't like it. Anyway, let's go on to the first one, and the first card that I think it has a little bit of... I don't necessarily think that it fits in Soul Sisters, but it's definitely worthwhile, which is Thalia Heretic Cathar. This is a first strike 3/2 for 3 mana. Definitely powerful enough. I've had Thalia herself in Soul Sisters. It's good versus like Storm, it's good versus the Delver decks. Haven't been too impressed with it because most of those decks I'm already pretty decent against. And this one, though, does make your opponent's non-basic lands come into play tapped. That means you can get a jump on your opponent. You go like first turn Soul Warden, second turn Giant's Primate, third turn Thalia, and then you can start the beatdown. But I think that just in this deck, it's not a card that I absolutely would want main board. And then sideboard, again, it's just, if it was 2 mana, of course, it'd be such a powerful card. I think Thalia Heretic Cathar is really something that wants me in Death and Taxes. And something you can flash this card in response to your opponent trying to fetch something. It just really messes up what they're trying to do. In Soul Sisters, probably not. It's like Aven Mind Sensor. I've had Aven Mind Sensor in the sideboard for Soul Sisters and just didn't think that it was worthy. On to the next card. Selfless Spirit. This reminds me a lot of Brenton Forge Tender. I think the Brenton Forge Tender is a little bit better because it is a 1-drop, and it really protects against the cards that you really care about protecting yourself against, which is Pyroclasm. It can actually prevent a red source that like Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix, and even like a Monastery Swift Spear. Or if they try to go all in, like the Monster Swift Spear and Temur Battle Rage out of Suicide Zoo, it can prevent. Selfless Spirit, though, is really good versus Wrath of God and Supreme Verdict. Those are the 2 cards that... Damnation as well. We got to think about Damnation because Jund is starting to use it. I think this is definitely a decent little sideboard card. It can protect all of your creatures you worry about. It's a 2/1 flyer for 2. That means it's pretty aggressive. I think that if the metagame does shift over to board wipe based decks, Selfless Spirit will definitely be in the sideboard. You can get it back with Return to the Ranks, so all of that is relevant. But as of right now, I'm not too worried about Wrath of God decks. It's more like Anger and Pyroclasm decks, and I think the Brenton Forge Tender just does a better job. And at the moment, I just think Mark of Asylum does a better job at that. But definitely keep this on your radar. If, again, the Wrath of God Supreme Verdict decks ever become big, this is going to be a go-to card. Let's go on to the next one, which is Lone Rider. Lone Rider is one of those I'm iffy about. Lone Rider, I think you'd want to go into a more human aggro-based deck, or maybe more Martyr of Sands. Because Martyr of Sands is another way to turn the Lone Rider into it turns into a 4/4 first strike lifelink trample Eldrazi Horror, and 4/4 is pretty relevant. It still dies to Abrupt Decay, but it starts to dodge Lightning Bolt, and it really can still dies to can't trade with Tasigur, but it's a 4/4 is definitely something that's a threat. I mean, it gets above Curd Apes, things like that against the Zoo. I mean, the Zoo's just gonna die to Soul Sisters anyway, but it's very aggressive. It starts to push through that damage and gains you a ton of life after that. So 1/1 at the first. So Lone Rider can curve perfectly too. So either with a Soul Warden or a Soul Sister or a Sarah's Ascendant, into a Thalia's Lieutenant, or into a Lone Rider into a Thalia's Lieutenant, if you can then swing in with your 2/2 now, and then hit for 2 damage and gain a life off of your Soul Attendant, you're going to be able to flip the Lone Rider. There's plenty of ways that you can flip it. It's just going to take some testing to see. The problem is it's like a Johnny's Pride Mate. Is the slot or Honor of the Pure? And Honor of the Pure actually does have some synergy with Lone Rider. So I don't think that Honor of the Pure is the card that wants to go out. But then when your Eldrazi does flip, it loses its value from Honor of the Pure. So I'm not quite sure it really... the non-bonus in that is very relevant. And Johnny's Pride Mate just gets insanely big. But it's something we would test. And maybe it's Spectral Processions, that the slot that it takes. Again, if we go all in a human strategy, Champion the Parish starts. If we cut Johnny's Pride Mate, I think that's when you start thinking about Champion the Parish. Because first turn, Champion the Parish into Lone Rider, you have a 2/2 out on board. And then Thalia's Lieutenant, you have a 3/3 and a 2/2. You're starting to go really aggressive. So... yeah, this is definitely a card we would have to test, see if it merits inclusion. As of now, I'm not quite certain. Alright, so that's Lone Rider. Now here's the card that I misread when I first was looking at cards. It's just uncommon. I got the idea because someone played it in draft last night, and I read it. I'm like, whoa! This does not say combat damage on it. It just says damage. And it's insanely good. Oh, wait. One card before that. Never mind. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about Collective Effort here. Collective Effort is a card that I definitely think is going to be put in the sideboard. I think you want to stick with Spectral Processions, though, if you're going to run Collective Effort. Collective Effort is a card that I definitely think has a lot of value. If it's going to replace anything, it's probably Sundering Growth. The thing that I don't like about Collective Effort, it doesn't kill an artifact, but a lot of the cards that I do want to kill in Modern are going to be enchantments. There are some pesky enchantments, like Ensnaring Bridge is one of, or Ensnaring Bridge is an artifact, actually. It's the Ghostly Prison. So, yeah, Ensnaring Bridge is something you do want to kill. The thing I like about Sundering Growth is it's not dead versus, like, Affinity. So, it does destroy an enchantment. So against Bogles, it can destroy, like, a key Daybreak Coronet or Ethereal Armor. The problem is this is also sorcery speed, but you're easily going to get the Escalate with Collected Effort, and with this it can be Destroy Creature's Power 4 or greater. That's going to be Tarmogoyf. A lot of the times it's going to be even a Scavenging Ooze that gets up to 4. And what I really like about Collective Effort is you do get the +1/+1 on each creature you target player controls. So it could actually replace Honor the Pure. Honor the Pure, though, is kind of like a static type effect, that if it's out, you get the bonus, and then every creature after that gets the bonus. But Collective Effort is something that I think might just have a little more value. It's definitely something we have to test out, whether it be a 1 of or 2 of. There's just a lot of value in the card. I wish it was instant speed. Maybe instant would have been broken, because then it would give us another way to combat really Infect, and even combat like Suicide Zoo. That's the problem, I think, with being sorcery speed. So maybe that just might keep it back from being played. Alright, the other one that I want to talk about is Blessed Alliance. Blessed Alliance is another Escalate for 2, so it's going to be 4 mana if you want to escalate this. But where I think this definitely does replace is the Celestial Flare. Celestial Flare, 9 times out of 10 you're going to be destroying an attacking creature, making an opponent exile or sacrifice an attacking creature. Yes, I have used it as a blocking creature, like when they block with their Edge Champion, you'd be like, haha, or same thing with Bogles, for example. They block and you make them sack it. But, yeah, like I said, 9 times out of 10 you're going to use Celestial Flare to make them sacrifice an attacking creature. So I think that Blessed Alliance is just better. It's just strictly better than Celestial Flare, and then you get the upside of untapping 2 creatures. That's a huge combat trick, actually, if, like, you make them sacrifice an attacking creature. You can do this during their attack step. Make them sacrifice a creature, untap 2 of your cards, and then you have two blockers back to maybe kill more things. So think about like the Zoo base decks. It's just one of those cards I don't think you need to bring in versus Zoo. I think Affinity, it gets really interesting. But where I do like this is also the Gain 4 Life. The Gain 4 Life is very relevant because it's very quick to make that your Sarah's Ascendant, or, speaking of Lone Rider, the ability to flip your Lone Rider. So I really like Blessed Alliance. It definitely is going to go in my sideboard in replace of the Celestial Flare. I think 2 of is probably the right number. If, in fact, Suicide Zoo, Bogles is a huge thing, you can easily run 4. I actually like this versus Merfolk as well. If there was a way to kill off an enchantment and then use Blessed Alliance in the same turn, and then get rid of their unblockable, you could go insane with that. It's basically a one-sided board wipe. So I think the Blessed Alliance definitely is going to go in the deck, and is super, super powerful and underrated. Standard, I think, actually wants this card a lot too. The sacrifice of attacking creatures is very, very relevant in, think about like Ulamog. There's a lot of like go big. Emrakul, there's another card that you can make him sacrifice after it's been brought in with Nahiri. So yeah, definitely think that you should keep this on your radar, and it should go in the Soul Sisters, replacing the Celestial Flare. Now, last but not least, is the Repel the Abominable. This is the card that I'm super, 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 super excited to put in this deck because I misread. It says prevent all damage that would be dealt by non-human sources. The only problem with that, there's one glaring problem with Repel the Abominable, and it's called Blighted Agent. The damn thing's a human. If Blighted Agent wasn't a human, then this would be the perfect card because it'd go against every deck. See, Monastery Mentor is also human, but Suicide Zoo is really going to try to get you with the Death Shadow. The Wild Nikado a lot of times gets pumped up. So against Death Shadow, it does everything but the Swift Spear, and some decks don't use Swift Spear. So if they're running the Kiln Fiend version, or if they're just all in a Death Shadow, Wild Nikado, and I think they run someone run the Landfall creature that becomes a 4/5. The Step Links, I think is what it's called. So Repel the Abominable works against that. They're all in strategy when they're going to try to go crazy with Become Immense and Temur Battle Rage. It'll prevent it. This can also be a one-sided board wipe. We've talked about how almost everything in the deck is humans, so you prevent all damage by non-humans, which is tons of... there's not a lot of human cards in Modern. Most of the things that are attacking you as Zoo are not going to be humans. Burn? I don't think you'd bring this in versus Burn. But where I really like Repel the Abominable is it can prevent the damage from Pyroclasm, can prevent the damage from Anger of the Gods, prevent the damage versus Lightning Bolt, Lightning Helix, Electrolyze. It can prevent the damage from... What's another one that they try to use as a board wipe in the format at the moment? I think that covers most of them. But what this prevents is scapeshift. Completely prevents Valakut. Valakut is not a human. Prevents all damage. Boom. They go off. They're your Soul Sisters. They don't think they need to keep back any sort of remand mana. You repel. Or just even in the like, a lot of times what they do is they get back mana after with... Yeah, they do float mana for scapeshift. But if they think they need to float a remand. But that also sets them back a turn. And Scapeshift has a hard time being set back a couple turns because you're gaining a lot of life with Soul Sisters. And some Scapeshift decks actually have like a limit to how much damage they can do. I think that a lot of Scapeshifts is like 36, I think is a sweet spot. Some are even a lot lower than that, is what all the damage that they can do. And if you can get Repel above, or I mean Soul Sisters above the 36, they have to rely on like trying to swing in with Secured Tri-Builders, which isn't a good option. Repel also is against like Goryo's Vengeance. You can prevent the damage from the Gristlebrand. You can prevent the damage in for like an all-in worm attack. And same thing against, I'm trying to think what other decks try to go in like all-in. Suicide Zoo we talked about. Affinity. Repel the Abominable can actually stop a lethal affinity. Infect without the Blighted Agent. I think it's still Inkmoth Nexus and Glistener Elf you get a shutdown against Infect. The only problem with that is really Blighted Agent's the card that gets me out of Infect. The Glistener Elf a lot of times doesn't. And yeah, just a lot of... Storm, Repel the Abominable actually hits Storm because it prevents it all. And it just doesn't say one source. That was the problem with Pay No Heed, is it was just one source. So Merfolk, a lethal attacking with Merfolk, and then you can get them on the backswing. So I really, really, really like this card. It's definitely going to go in my sideboard. Probably going to replace Pay No Heed, and probably going to place Mark of Asylum. So apologies for kind of the clutterness of this video. Hopefully I can edit it up and make it look clean. But this is just my ideas for the Soul Sisters. So the two cards I really like is going to be Repel the Abominable and Blessed Alliance. I really think that those two will immediately go in my sideboard. in Soul Sisters, replacing Celestial Flare and Pay No Heed. The Collective Effort is still kind of a wild card, and same thing with the Lone Rider. Both these are very, very wild card. We'll test them out to see if they're actually viable. If they're viable, I don't know where Collective Effort will replace. I'm still thinking Honor the Pure is and then Collective Effort, well, I will definitely not replace Honor the Pure. I think it will replace, like, possibly Thalia's Lieutenant in this type of shell, and then it's just another way to buff up your Spectral Processions. And I don't know. It's probably more of a sideboard card if there's something of Power 4 or greater or an enchantment. Maybe a 1-of in the sideboard for a Sundering Growth. And I still think you want to keep some amount of Sundering Growths. Maybe just instead of Stony Silence, because we don't really care about too many artifact-based. Affinity still is fine without Stony Silences. So probably right now I'd cut 1 Sundering Growth, 1 Stony Silence, put in Collective Effort, put in some of the aforementioned cards. And then if we do build with the Lone Rider, it's gonna mess everything up, because I think that we don't have room for it at the moment. It might want more Martyr of the Sands to try to really get this off on turn 3 to make it flip. I don't even know if you want to be able to flip. It's turn 2 that, turn 2 is the kind of sweet spot where you want it to flip, but I don't know. Well, you can cast it turn 3 and flip it with Martyr on the same turn. And that's not a bad idea. It's something that will have to be tested and tested and tested. I'm thinking it's not quite going to fit. Selfless Spirit is definitely an option if we have more of sweeper-based decks. And Thalia is still another unknown wild card. If we do go the human route, of course, this is a card that can go in there. Gisela is not a good card. I think that Hero Bladehold in almost every scenario is just better. Same thing with Archangel Thune, and they both compete for that slot. Hope you enjoyed this list. If you have any suggestions, if I missed a card out of the Eldritch Moon, let me know in the comments section below. This has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and are looking for more Soul Sisters gameplay, I have a ton of them if you click on the link to the left to a playlist for the history of all the games I've played on Soul Sisters on my channel. There are tons and tons and tons. As always, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.